Hello coders and welcome to another How to Code Well podcast. For those watching on the YouTube channel, you'll see that I'm on my own, I'm on my Todd. There is no guest here. This is done on purpose because I think what I would like to do is from a couple of times a year, maybe every quarter, is have a video, a podcast where it's just me. I'm talking about the podcast. I'm talking about what's happening with the podcast, with How to Code Well, and also discussing a single topic that I want to talk about. And this topic we're going to be talking about today is adaptability, having that adaptability skill in your career in web development. So before I get into any of that, let's talk about the podcast. So the podcast is doing super, super well. It's doing far better than I had ever anticipated, ever expected. This is in its first year. So the podcast came out last November. That was when I first created it. So we had November and December, and I termed that as season 1. And then this year in 2019, this is season 2. So we've just come out of September. It is now October. So this is the first year of the podcast, really. And it's doing really well. We've reached more countries than we haven't reached. And there are tens of thousands of people listening to the podcast, which I am so happy about. It's so cool. Especially for something that I just do in my spare time. I say spare time. I make it sound like I've got a lot of spare time. I don't. But this is what I do in the spare time. And it's awesome to have this sort of reach and audience. And it's so great to be able to talk to all of the guests that I've had on the show. And I'll be talking about the schedule, who's coming up in the show, what we're going to do at the end of the year and so forth later on. So just a massive thank you to everybody who's listened, who's watched, who's subscribed, who's contributed to the show. It's awesome to have you on. Let's talk about adaptability. So adaptability, we can break the word up into 2 sections. So it's the ability to adapt. So this kind of means that, throughout life, things happen, things change, we have to cope with various things that happen in life that perhaps weren't expected, or perhaps we have been told various things that are going to happen in the future or in the near future. And we therefore have the ability or the time to then adapt to that change, to plan for that change. Sometimes things just happen and we have to adapt and react extremely quickly. So I'm going to be talking about this in the context of web development. But let me just talk about something that I'm going to have to adapt to and change. And this will affect the podcast, and it's happening very quickly, very soon, I should say. So this weekend is the final weekend where I will not be aware of what it's like owning a dog. So next weekend, we're actually picking up Murphy Pup. Murphy is an English Springer Spaniel. He's so cute. He'll be, a handful of weeks old, 8 weeks old. And he's a bundle of joy. Now, I've never owned a dog before. I've been around people with dogs. My wife's had dogs in her life. She knows what to expect, to a degree, but I don't have that sort of, I've never needed to walk the dog. I've never needed to look after another creature apart from my cats. And we were discussing this the other evening, and we both can't remember what it was like before we had cats. Right. So we've had cats, we've had Flick and Pixels for such a long time that becomes the new normal. So when the cats get poorly, we take them to the vet. When the cats need food, we feed them, obviously, and so forth. But cats are very sort of hands-off in that regard. Usually they just go around and sleep in random rooms, perhaps even in the office here. With dogs, it's slightly different because there is more. I don't want to say that they're more high maintenance, but there's certainly more that you have to do to train a dog, especially a puppy, to house train a dog, to train the dog socially with other dogs and all of that stuff. Cats just get on with it. Dogs, you kind of need to have a certain degree of input and stuff when you're bringing up a dog. Now, this is not any other dog. This is a English Springer Spaniel, which means that there's going to be a great deal of activity that is needed. So we are both aware that we are going to need to change our lifestyles to adapt to this change. We don't know by what degree we need to do that, but we are aware of it. We've made provisions for things like, buying toys and, buying dog beds and extra food and all of this stuff. So we're prepared in that sense, in the supply sense, but we're not, and the resource sense, but we're not prepared perhaps in the knowing what we need to do, on a daily basis, because we both haven't been in that situation. So that's an example of where one needs to adapt quickly, but has the opportunity to sort of, prepare for it. So we found Murphy when he was a couple of weeks old, and we've been interacting with the breeders for a very long time, during, and we've seen Murphy a good few times during that, which is great. And we've been able to purchase various things that we need in the house for the dog to be here. So there's those things that we've done in order to become adaptable. I will bring him on when we do get him, and I'll introduce everybody to Murphy. But let's talk about this from the career sense, adaptability. So there's there's a lot of things that happen in a career, and one needs to adapt to it. Let's say, for example, let's talk about some of the negative things that could happen. So let's say, for example, you get made redundant. Let's say, for example, the company goes bust. Let's say, for example, something happens that, that suddenly a project goes wrong or something like that, and you have to jump onto it. So these things can just come out of the blue. These are things that you're out of control of, right? So the best thing to do in that circumstance, in my opinion, is to seize control. So try not to see these negative things as a real negative. Try and see them as much as you can as a positive, in the sense that it's an opportunity. Let's say the real worst one is that you lose the job for some apparent reason. Perhaps there's a problem with, the company's gone under or something. It's going to be really difficult. It's going to be really hard, but eventually this will become an opportunity to do something different, to change what you're doing, or to work for someone else, because, eventually you'll get another job. So it's the journey that takes that you can prepare for. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very stressful. The other ones are like let's say there's a massive bug in the system that everybody has to suddenly react to. That's a very spontaneous thing. So that's very different. But you have to change your mind space. You have to go, right, I was working on this, but suddenly the alarm bells have gone off and everybody's been told that they need to work on this. This means that I need to shift my thinking. And this can be quite tricky and troublesome for some developers, because we get into this zone, and this zone is very sort of good when we're in it. Coming out of it and then trying to get back into it again is quite difficult. And trying to change logical thinking can be quite challenging as well. But these are things that happen as developers, and we have to cope with these things. They are sort of non-technical things that we have to adapt to. There are obviously technical things that one needs to adapt to as well. So let's say, for example, you learnt PHP and you are now trying to learn a framework around PHP. You are therefore trying to adapt your thinking and your learning to a framework, and you are learning that framework. You've learnt the actual the underlying language, which is fantastic. Now you're working through an actual framework. And you have to you have to think, well, the more I learn on that, the less I'm going to be learning on this. And you mold yourself to be that particular developer that you want to be. This has happened to me a lot of times throughout my career. And I've accidentally fallen into this full stack developer role where I've been asked to do various things in my career, and I've just done them. I've just learned how to do them, and I've adapted to that. And therefore, you could class me as not a master of one, but a knower of many in that sense. I was having a conversation with a recruitment agent the other day, and we were talking about the skills that I had. And there was we went through a long list of skills, a very broad list. And sometimes developers would like to rein that in and go, well, actually, I want to be focusing just on these particular skill sets, rather than have some knowledge in lots of different things, but not have a refined knowledge in one. Also, in a developer's career, a developer could change from being a coder to a manager. So there's an awful lot of things that one needs to adapt and change to as well. There's a lot of sacrifice that has to go into that as well, because you're doing less coding and more managing. And, we've talked to people on the podcast who have done that. And that's been really interesting to hear how they've dealt with that, because it's a case of changing the scope of the problem. Okay, you're solving a different problem, or you're solving the same problem but in a different way. So that's really interesting. Do check out Jeremy Onion's podcasts, interviews on that, because he's a technical director and he used to be a coder. We used to work together at Fast Hosts. So he's gone through several changes and adapted to various different circumstances. Of course, that also includes him traveling and all of that stuff. So I just want to go through this article on cleverism.com. It's about adaptability and the importance of adaptability. I guess one thing before I go through this is that you shouldn't ever go and think, well, this is what I'm doing now for the rest of my life. I'm just a PHP developer and that's it. I'll never look at any framework. I'll never look at any JavaScript. I'll never look at any HTML. I'm just a PHP developer. I really don't think that is a good mindset to have. I think that you have to be flexible to a degree. I think that when you're working in web development, you need to be aware you need to have some form of awareness of these technologies, other technologies that PHP can use and utilize. And at the end of the day, PHP is used on web servers. So you need to have some sort of awareness of what that web server can do and all of that good stuff. This article is pretty interesting. It's all about how to improve the skills of being adaptable. So, for example, observing and monitoring changes in your environment. So being aware of what might happen and and adapting for that. I'm always trying to find various different plans. So, for example, if I was to go through if I was to change my career, I would want to have a plan B. If I wanted to buy a sofa, I would want to have a plan B. I would want to have 3 quotes at the very least when I'm getting my fence fixed. You need to be aware of the other opportunities. You need to observe and monitor also the changes in your environment. And these things, they can be quite subtle. They could be quite subtle changes. And you need to react to these as well. You need to put things in place, like I've mentioned with the planning. And you also need to be willing to learn. So observing your environment isn't enough. You also need to learn how the environment changes and the mechanics and the players behind that. So you need to be observant of, maybe you're working in a company and people are moving into different departments. You need to be aware of this. Is that an opportunity for you? Is this going to impact what you're currently working on? That kind of thing. There's also a point here about avoiding procrastination. So this is something that I'm struggling with, because usually what happens when I've got lots and lots to do, which I always have, I find myself doing something that is completely unrelated to all the things that I need to do. Sometimes I'll just go through and I'll just tidy something up. I'll just randomly go into a room in my house and I'll just tidy the room up. usually I'm thinking and processing a problem or a bug or something whilst I'm doing that, which is fine, but I'm not actually actively working on the thing that I should be working on. Try and avoid procrastination. Try and avoid the lunch breaks where suddenly the lunch breaks has an extra half an hour on and you're just downstairs watching TV or playing on whatever or talking on Twitter. Twitter is a really bad one for procrastination. Sometimes I'll make a cup of tea and instead of coming back up the stairs, I'm actually still down there holding my tea and it's half drank and I'm on Twitter and I'm sending tweets to people, which is not great. And also acknowledge the fact that changes are bound to occur. So changes are always going to happen in life. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly reasonable to stay in the same company for years and years and years. But you need to be aware that your comfort blanket might be pulled away from you, and when it does, it'll be pulled away from you, or if it does, it'll be pulled away from you by an external source, and you probably won't see it coming. So you want to have that ability of acceptance. You're accepting the fact that change will happen. You're accepting the fact that you will need to alter your course and go down a different fork in the road. So something from my personal life, I have recently finished a very large contract, which means that I have space to do other pieces of work. So I have been talking to recruitment agents. I've been talking to my existing client base. I've been talking to various different people. And none of those things that I've done are the same as what I've done for the last few years with this other contract that I was working on. So I have to accept the fact that whatever I do in the next few years isn't going to be the same as what I do or have done in the past. And this is a real important thing, I think, of life and as developers, especially if you're a contractor, because things happen really quickly. I was on a phone call the other day and they were like, right, if this happens, the interview will happen this afternoon or tomorrow. And then, the next day, if you get past that interview, there is a Skype call and then boom, you're straight working there and you have to travel and do all of this jazz and stuff. So it's very immediate, right? It's very quick. It's very snappy to do. And you have to accept that. So when that happens, you have to put things in place like, travel and transport. You have to put things in place like, costings and fees. You have to talk about, you have to do negotiation. You have to set up your CV and all of this stuff. And those things are in your control. They are in your control. And you want to try and have as much things in your control as possible. Because I find that the more you have outside of your control, the more external sources, things that are controlling the changes that are being made, the more anxious I'll become, the more sort of like, because I'm not planning this, I'm not in control. It makes me sound like I'm a bit of a control freak, but I like to know that if this fails, then this can happen, or I can just put that in place. Like, let's say, for example, when I was moving house, when we moved to Gloucester originally, I called this project Switchshire because we were moving from Wiltshire to Gloucestershire, and I had a series of houses that I was looking at, a series of places that we were renting at the time. And it was a case of, if this fell through, we would then just do this, and I would have the phone numbers, I would have the addresses ready and going through. And it was almost like a factory. I got a little bit disconnected emotionally from the whole process, and I was looking at it from a flow diagram perspective, I suppose. Which is a good thing in some ways and a bad thing in others, because obviously you need to be attached to the house that you end up in. I was only renting at that time, so it wasn't like, the house that we're in now. But you had to do it. We had to do it in a rapid sort of succession. It was like, right, we moved to Gloucester because we are moving I'm moving careers, or I'm changing my career, I'm changing my job, I need to work in Gloucester. We were originally in Wiltshire. So it was like, right, I'm doing this. I need to find a place to rent. Regardless of where it is, it has to happen. So it was a case of trying to go through various different sort of logical steps and procedures to come up with that. And lots of we had our requirements, as you would expect, and the ones that didn't meet the requirement, they were just out of the door. We didn't think of them again. And it was this sort of very quick, almost like a sausage factory type sort of thing. It was like boom, boom, boom. And then before we knew it, we landed in Gloucester, and we had to start work very quickly. And then we had to adapt to that particular environment pretty quickly as well. And then we found our feet and we moved here, and that's kind of the story. But that's the whole sort of adapting in life and in general. And with web development, I think that, when we get bugs and we get problems and we get challenges and we get career difficulties, we have to adapt to those as well. And also we need to be empathetic to other people who are adapting to the environment as well. So for example, going from a degree or going from college or going from a boot camp to going into your full-time career, your first ever development job, that is a huge step, a ginormous step to take, and one that you have to quickly adapt to and progress. And then moving from junior to sort of mid to intermediate to senior, or whatever the titles are these days, that there's different responsibilities that one has. There's different things that one needs to be aware of and cope with. A lot of these things will come automatically, right? Because you suddenly get used to the environment that you're working in. You get used to where the office is. You get used to the people that you meet on a daily basis. You get used to the different types of meetings and all of this stuff. And then you might at some point be hosting those meetings, holding those meetings, the meetings that you weren't really aware of when you were doing a boot camp before you were actually in the industry. So, a lot of things you can do very sort of automatically over a period of time. I think, though, it's when things have to happen rapidly, and I think that it's when the control is outside of your scope. That is when the pressure gets put on. And I think that at those times, it's a case of trying to take as much control as you can and planning as much as you can. I would personally be more surprised than disappointed. So let's say, for example, I put all of my eggs in one basket. I would be very disappointed if that basket fell apart, right? What you want to do is try and spread and diversify. You want to try and have different plans in place. If this doesn't work out, you do this. If that doesn't work out, you do that. And that kind of thing. And also, if you can, try and sleep on it as well. If you've got the time to think about it, then think about it. I think that's good. But don't think about it to the point where you are getting yourself upset about it. You're right, all right? Because there are these things come with a time frame. This is going to happen at this time. So you have this period of time to worry about it. Well, don't worry about it. This time to prepare and plan. So that's the adaptability stuff. I hope you don't mind that little rant. I want to talk a little bit about the schedule coming up, because obviously the next week we're going to be going back to our original schedule, our original planned programming. So not in any particular order. I'm just going to go through some of the names who are coming on. So we've got Jenna Charlton. We're going to be talking about software testing. She's a software tester, speaker, an awesome person on Twitter. So we're going to speak and we're going to do an interview. Jeremy Onion is also coming on. We're going to do a podcast takeover. He's interviewing me. We did that a few weeks ago. That was very fun. So that's coming on soon. Ted M. Young, he is a streamer on Twitch. He teaches Java and TDD and all the other good stuff around Java and Spring and stuff. So do check him out on Twitch if you haven't done so already. I used to know Java. I say I used to know. If someone put Java in front of me, I probably wouldn't know what it was. But I was taught that at uni. So it's very interesting to watch his streams. So yeah. Then we have Matthew Glenn. I say then we have, these aren't in any particular order. We're going to be talking about how it's like to get into the web development industry, which is going to be pretty fun. Adam Culp is coming on again. We're going to be talking about beach casts and YouTube, and other bits and pieces as well. So if you haven't done so, please check out the previous interview I did with Adam. We've got Drew McLennan coming on, and others as well. So it's going to be an awesome, fun-packed few months on this channel. And I'm really, really excited to talk to everybody who's on this schedule. And we've got other people on the schedule who I haven't actually put on the schedule yet, because we're talking about dates and other bits and pieces. If you fancy coming on, if you want to be interviewed on the How to Code Well podcast, then please do get in touch. You can drop me an email, or you can send me a direct message. Direct messages are probably better on Twitter. There is also a Discord channel. You can go to howtocodewell.net/Discord, and that will forward you on to the Discord invite, so you can get invited there. For those who watch my Twitch streams, for those who are Patreons, then you can get access to the pro channels as well. So that's a pro voice chat as well as the pro chat as well. I am creating a Discord bot in Node.js, which is turning out to be a right challenge. So that's fun. So we do have a Discord bot, but it's kind of in a development stage. And also, I'm working on various different things on Twitch to do with microcontrollers and MicroPython and all of these good little chips and stuff. So we've got a ring light, NeoPixel ring light that's flashing up, and I'm going to be building that as part of one of my courses that I'm doing, which is super, super fun. And also we have our invoice application that we're building with PHP. So if you're watching on the YouTubes, if you're listening on the podcasts, if you're watching the Twitch streams, if you're, chilling out on Twitter, send me a message, say hello, say that you've listened, tell me what you think. It's very awesome to hear from you. We are doing, when the YouTube channel does hit 10,000 subscribers, which I'm hoping will be fairly soon, because I think we've got 8,500 at the moment. We're going to be doing a Ask Me Anything, and I'm going to be doing this on YouTube. So if you've got questions, and I've got a bunch of questions at the moment, but if you've got any questions, then do send me those. It doesn't have to be anything related to programming, doesn't have to be related to web development, it could be anything. Ask me anything. I'm totally open for that. But anyway, I've taken far too much of your time. I want to just say happy coding. I want to say that do look after each other and be kind to each other. Happy coding, everyone. And I'll see you again next time. Cheers. Bye.